The girl sat quietly at the edge of the classroom, her small hands folded neatly on her lap. She had always been quiet, the kind of student who could easily be overlooked in a room full of noisy children. Her clothes were simple, nothing fancy, and her hair, though clean and brushed, was tied back in a plain ponytail. She didn't have the loud personality that grabbed attention, and she didn't try to. She had learned early that it was safer to remain unnoticed, to blend in with the background, and to avoid the whispers and laughter that often came when she tried to stand out. Even so, there was something different about her, something that no one could see at first glance. Behind her calm eyes, there was a world of thoughts and dreams, a spark of creativity and passion that no one had yet discovered. She had always loved music, though she kept it hidden from most people. The piano at home was her only companion, the one place where she could be herself without fear of judgment. She spent hours every day pressing the keys, letting her fingers flow over them like water, creating melodies that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her heart. In that room, with the sunlight streaming through the window, she was free. School, however, was a different story. Her teachers did not notice the quiet strength in her. They saw only a shy, ordinary girl who struggled with attention and often kept to herself. Some of them even thought she lacked talent, that she would never shine like the other children who spoke loudly, laughed easily, or excelled in everything. The girl felt the sting of their doubt, but she had learned not to let it bother her too much. She knew that she would have her chance one day, even if no one believed it. On this particular morning, the classroom buzzed with energy. The teacher was announcing a special event, a chance for students to perform in front of the school. It was meant to be exciting, a moment to show off skills, whether in singing, playing an instrument, or reciting a poem. The girl listened quietly as the teacher called out names. Some children cheered when they were chosen. Some smiled confidently, certain they would impress everyone. She felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. She had not expected to be selected. When her name was finally called, a hush fell over her, and the whispers began. "You? Really?" One student muttered. A few others giggled behind their hands. The girl's face burned, but she didn't reply. She simply stood, trying to keep her hands steady as she walked to the front of the classroom. Her heart pounded so loudly that she thought everyone could hear it. The teacher gave her an encouraging smile, though it seemed forced, as if even the teacher doubted what she could do. She tried not to let it shake her. She had done this countless times at home, alone, where no one could laugh or judge her. She told herself it would be the same here, that she only needed to focus on the music, on the keys beneath her fingers. The piano sat in the corner of the room, an old upright model with scratches on the wood, and a few keys that didn't quite line up. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't matter. The girl approached it carefully, pulling out the bench and sitting down. Her hands hovered above the keys for a moment as she took a deep breath. She could feel the eyes of the other students on her, the skeptical looks of the teachers, the whispers and stifled laughter. She had felt this many times before, but it never got easier. Yet, deep inside, there was a quiet determination that pushed her forward. She reminded herself that she wasn't performing for them. She was performing for herself, for the music that had always lived inside her, waiting for a chance to be heard. As she positioned her fingers, she noticed the faint cracks in the wood and the slightly worn keys. She didn't care. The piano had character, and she had learned to play around its imperfections. She closed her eyes briefly, letting her mind calm and her heart steady. She remembered the melodies she had practiced countless times at home, the ones that had made her smile and cry in private. They were not grand compositions, but they were hers, and they carried every bit of her passion. The classroom seemed to grow quieter as she prepared to play. Even the teacher stopped talking, as if sensing the tension in the room. The other students leaned forward, curiosity replacing some of their amusement. Perhaps they were beginning to wonder if she could really play. Perhaps they were waiting for the moment to laugh. The girl didn't know or care. She only knew that when her fingers touched the keys, something inside her would awaken, and the world would fade away. Her first touch on the piano was gentle, almost tentative. She had learned to trust her instincts, And in that moment, she let her fingers move freely, guided by the music inside her. The notes flowed softly at first, delicate and pure, carrying a sense of wonder and emotion that the room had never heard before. Some students blinked in surprise. Some teachers leaned slightly forward, curious despite themselves. The sound filled the space, small at first, but growing richer and more confident with every passing second. As she played, the girl forgot everything else. The whispers, the laughter, the doubt. She forgot the expectations and the skepticism. All that existed was the music and her connection to it. Her fingers danced across the keys, moving in ways she hadn't even consciously planned. Each note seemed to tell a story of a girl who had always been underestimated, a girl who had hidden her passion in silence, a girl who was finally being heard. The expressions in the room began to change. Some of the students who had been ready to laugh now sat in stunned silence. The teacher, who had doubted her, felt a mix of surprise and admiration. The girl could feel the shift, though she didn't let it distract her. She was still focused on the music, letting it flow naturally, letting it speak for her in a way words never could. She had practiced for years in secret, and now the world could finally witness the fruits of her dedication. The melodies grew stronger, more confident, more beautiful with each measure. She was no longer just a quiet girl at the back of the classroom. She was an artist commanding attention without even trying. The music carried her emotions, the joy, the fear, the hope, and shared them with everyone who listened. Even the students who had doubted her began to feel something shift inside themselves. They could not look away. They could not ignore the talent that was unfolding right before their eyes. By the time she reached the end of her piece, the room was completely silent. The last note lingered in the air, fading slowly like a whisper. The girl lifted her hands from the keys and sat back on the bench, her chest rising and falling as she caught her breath. She opened her eyes and looked around. Faces that had once been skeptical now reflected awe and wonder. Teachers, students, even those who had been the first to laugh, stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. For a long moment no one spoke. Then, gradually, the applause began. It was hesitant at first, small claps from a few students, then louder as more joined in. The teacher finally stood, smiling genuinely this time, clapping along with the rest. The girl felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of relief and joy. She had done it. She had shared her music with the world, and they had listened. They had seen her not as a quiet, ordinary girl, but as someone with a gift, someone who had something valuable to offer. She smiled softly, feeling both shy and proud at the same time. The laughter and doubt had vanished, replaced by admiration and respect. She had not needed to speak a single word. The music had done it all. And in that moment, she knew something important. She didn't need anyone else's approval to shine. She only needed to believe in herself and her passion, and the world would eventually hear her, just as it had today. As she returned to her seat, the whispers had completely disappeared. Conversations were now full of excitement and questions. How did she do that? She's amazing. I didn't know she could play like that. The girl listened quietly, a small smile on her lips. She didn't feel the need to boast. The music had spoken for her, and it had said everything she wanted to say. She realized that this was only the beginning. There would be other performances, other moments to show her talent, other chances to inspire and touch people with her music. But for now, she simply enjoyed the feeling of having been heard, of having made her mark in a world that had almost overlooked her. That day, the girl learned something that would stay with her forever. She learned that passion and dedication could break through even the toughest walls of doubt. She learned that talent, when nurtured and shared, could silence laughter and disbelief. Most importantly, she learned that her own belief in herself was stronger than anyone else's opinion. And as she walked home that afternoon, the sun warming her face, she carried with her a quiet confidence, a secret joy, and the knowledge that her music could change the way people saw her, and perhaps even change the world around her, one note at a time. The next morning, the girl walked into the school with a sense of quiet anticipation. She still remembered the whispers and laughter from the previous day, though she tried not to let them affect her. Some of her classmates had begun to talk about her in low voices, some curious, some skeptical. The teachers, too, seemed to have taken notice, but their expressions were mixed. Some were surprised, some still doubtful. She had learned long ago that the opinions of others could shift quickly, and that admiration could turn into envy in an instant. So she focused only on her own goal, to play, to create, and to share her music. It was a bright morning, and the hallways were bustling with students hurrying to their classes. She carried her books quietly, keeping to the side, avoiding the curious glances that followed her wherever she went. She had noticed the new whispers. Some students were saying she must have practiced all night, some speculating that she had hidden talent that no one had ever seen before. The girl didn't respond. She didn't need to explain herself or justify her skill. She knew what she could do, and that was enough. When she entered the music room, she saw that it was already filled with students. Today was the day of the big rehearsal before the school assembly. Each student who had been chosen to perform was supposed to play their piece in front of everyone so the teachers could see how it would go. The girl's heart beat faster as she looked around the room. Some students smiled confidently, chatting with their friends, while others fidgeted nervously. The energy was tense, full of excitement and fear. The teachers were at the front, taking notes and whispering among themselves. One of them, who had always been critical of her, gave a small, skeptical nod as she entered. He had seen her play before, briefly, but he didn't believe she could hold the attention of a full audience. He expected mistakes, hesitations, or simple, safe music that wouldn't impress anyone. The girl could sense the doubt in his eyes, but she didn't let it disturb her. She had faced doubt before, and she had learned to let it slide off her like water from a leaf. "All right," the music teacher said, clapping her hands lightly. "Let's begin the rehearsal. One at a time, please." The first few students went up, performing simple pieces, each note measured and careful. Some were good, some were average, but all seemed nervous under the watchful eyes of the teachers. The girl watched quietly, sitting on the bench, waiting for her turn. She felt a small knot of anxiety in her stomach, but it was familiar. She had experienced it many times before, though never in front of so many people at once. Still, she reminded herself, the music was hers. She would play as she always had, letting it speak for her. When the teachers finally called her name, a few students exchanged amused glances. One whispered under his breath, "I wonder if she can really do it this time." A small laugh followed, though it was quickly stifled when the teachers glared at the room. She felt the weight of every pair of eyes on her as she walked to the piano. She noticed the scuff marks on the floor from the last performances, the faint scratches on the piano, and the slightly uneven keys. None of it mattered. She had played on worse instruments at home, instruments that had been out of tune and old, yet still allowed her to create beauty. The teacher gave her a nod, indicating that it was her turn. She sat down carefully, adjusting the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, everything felt heavy. The expectation, the judgment, the skepticism. She closed her eyes briefly, taking a deep breath, and felt the familiar rhythm of her own heart calm her. She reminded herself of the hours she had spent practicing in silence, the times she had played when no one was listening, and the joy she had felt when the music had filled her room. This was no different. She only needed to trust herself. As she pressed the first key, the note rang out clear and confident. The room seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. The teachers looked up sharply, surprised by the richness and clarity of the sound. Some students leaned forward, unsure of what to expect. The girl's fingers moved with precision, flowing from one key to another, creating a melody that seemed to carry a story of its own. She played with emotion, letting each note express her feelings, her determination, her quiet strength, and the passion she had kept hidden for so long. At first, a few students tried to hide their amazement, whispering to each other with disbelief. One boy muttered, "I didn't know she could play like that." A girl whispered, "It's beautiful. I've never heard anything like it." Even the skeptical teacher found himself leaning forward, his expression softening as he listened. He had expected a simple, safe performance, but this was something entirely different. The music was alive, flowing naturally, and commanding attention in a way that was impossible to ignore. The girl played with growing confidence. She didn't think about the whispers, the laughter, or the skeptical glances. She only thought about the music, about the way it moved through her fingers and into the room. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her soul, and the room responded. The students' chatter fell silent. The teacher's pens stopped writing. All that remained was the sound of the piano and the girl's quiet determination. As she reached the middle of her piece, the melody grew stronger, richer, and more expressive. She was no longer just a student at the back of the class. She was a performer, commanding the room with every note she played. The students who had been ready to laugh or doubt her now sat in awe, their mouths slightly open, eyes wide. Some were even leaning forward, captivated by the music. Even the teacher who had doubted her could not hide his admiration. He realized that he had underestimated her talent and that his previous judgments had been unfair. The girl continued, her fingers moving effortlessly over the keys. She added subtle variations, small flourishes that showed her creativity and understanding of the music. Every note was deliberate, every pause meaningful. The music told a story of perseverance, of hidden talent, of someone who had faced doubt but refused to give up. The room seemed to hold its breath, hanging on every sound, every moment, every emotion she expressed. By the time she reached the final notes, the atmosphere in the room had completely changed. What had started as skepticism and doubt had transformed into admiration and wonder. The last note lingered in the air, soft and delicate, fading like a whisper. She lifted her hands slowly, her chest rising and falling with a mixture of relief and pride. The room remained silent for a heartbeat longer, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started with a few hesitant claps from the students closest to her. Then, more joined in, until the room was filled with genuine appreciation. The teachers stood as well, clapping enthusiastically, their earlier doubts replaced with respect. The skeptical teacher, who had expected a mistake, now wore a look of astonished admiration. The girl smiled softly, feeling a warmth in her chest. She had done what she had set out to do. She had shared her music with the world, and they had seen her talent for what it truly was. After the rehearsal, the teachers spoke quietly among themselves. They were discussing her potential, the mistakes they had made in underestimating her, and the ways they could encourage her further. Some students gathered around, asking questions, wanting to know more about how she had learned to play so beautifully. She answered politely, quietly, never boasting, simply sharing the small details of her practice and love for music. Her humility only made her more admirable in the eyes of those around her. As the girl left the music room that day, she felt a quiet sense of triumph. She had faced doubt, laughter, and skepticism, and she had emerged stronger and more confident. She realized that this was only the beginning. There would be other challenges, other performances, and other moments when people might doubt her. But she now knew that her passion, her practice, and her belief in herself were stronger than any mockery or skepticism. Walking through the hallways, she noticed the way students looked at her differently. Some smiled, some nodded in respect, and some whispered in admiration. The laughter and doubt had not disappeared completely, but it no longer had power over her. She had learned that true confidence comes not from what others think, but from knowing your own worth and your own talent. And as she reached her classroom, she carried with her a quiet joy, a growing belief in herself, and the knowledge that her music could speak louder than words ever could. That evening, she sat at the piano at home once more. The sunlight streamed through the window, just as it always had, and she let her fingers flow over the keys. The music came naturally, effortlessly, and beautifully. She remembered the faces at school, the skepticism, the doubt, and now the admiration and awe. She realized that the journey was only beginning, and that each note she played was a step forward in showing the world who she really was. And for the first time, She felt a deep, unshakable confidence that nothing could take away. The day of the school assembly had finally arrived. The auditorium was buzzing with noise as students filled the seats, chattering excitedly and moving to find the best spots. Teachers were arranging papers, checking the schedule, and whispering to each other. Parents had come too, some eager to see the performances, others unsure what to expect. Backstage, the performers were stretching their fingers, taking deep breaths, and trying to calm their nerves. Among them, the girl stood quietly, her heart beating steadily, though her stomach was filled with a mixture of excitement and nerves. She could hear the laughter and chatter of students outside the curtain, and a small part of her felt the old anxiety rising. She had faced skepticism before, but now it was on a much larger scale. The entire school would see her perform, not just a small group of classmates in a classroom. The weight of expectation pressed against her, yet she refused to let it control her. She reminded herself that the music was hers, and it had always been her way of expressing what words could not. If she could focus on that, nothing else would matter. Backstage, other performers whispered among themselves, some nervously, some with pride. They had seen her play during the rehearsal and knew that she was good, but many still assumed she might falter under the pressure of a full audience. Some smirked quietly, thinking that perhaps nerves would get to her. The girl noticed these small glances and whispers, but she didn't let them disturb her. She had learned long ago that doubt from others was temporary, while the trust in her own abilities was lasting. Finally, it was her turn. The MC announced her name, and a hush fell over the auditorium. Eyes turned toward the stage, some skeptical, some curious, some openly surprised that it was her. The girl stepped forward calmly, her dress simple, her hair neatly tied back, her posture poised. She could hear faint whispers and a few nervous chuckles, but she ignored them. She approached the piano, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys as she adjusted the bench. For a brief moment, she paused, feeling the weight of the audience on her shoulders. Hundreds of eyes were watching her, waiting for something. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a second, centering herself. She thought of the countless hours she had spent at home, practicing in secret, letting her fingers glide over the keys, creating melodies that expressed her deepest feelings. This was no different. She only needed to trust herself and the music. Then, she pressed the first key. The note rang out pure, clear, and unwavering. The sound carried through the auditorium, and for a moment, there was complete silence. The students who had been whispering and laughing froze, their mouths slightly open. The teachers leaned forward, their expressions a mix of surprise and admiration. Parents who had expected a simple performance sat up straighter, their eyes widening. The single note seemed to hang in the air, commanding attention, as if announcing that something extraordinary was about to happen. The girl continued, letting her fingers move naturally, flowing from one note to another. The music started soft, delicate, almost fragile, but it grew steadily, confident and rich. Each chord seemed to tell a story, each melody a reflection of her emotions. She played with all the passion and skill she had nurtured in private, letting the music speak louder than words ever could. The audience was captivated. Even the students who had doubted her, who had whispered and smirked, were now leaning forward, wide-eyed and silent. The teacher who had once been skeptical found himself holding his breath. He had watched her in rehearsal and thought he knew her limits, but now he realized he had underestimated her completely. The notes filled the room, resonating in every corner, touching hearts and minds. The girl's fingers moved gracefully over the keys, controlled yet free, precise yet full of feeling. Every sound she created told the audience who she truly was, a quiet, ordinary-looking girl with an extraordinary gift. As the piece progressed, her confidence grew. The music swelled, rising and falling like waves, carrying emotion with it. She could feel the audience responding without even looking at them. She could sense the shock, the awe, the wonder in their reactions. The laughter, the skepticism, the doubt. It all vanished in the power of the music. She was no longer a girl sitting quietly in the back of a classroom. She was a performer, commanding attention, expressing herself fully and touching every listener in the room. The students who had whispered about her talent now exchanged astonished glances. Some whispered to each other, unable to contain their amazement. "She's incredible," one murmured. "I never thought she could play like this," said another. Even the usually strict teachers had stopped writing notes or talking among themselves. They were listening, completely focused, as the girl's music filled the auditorium. Her hands danced across the keys, creating melodies that were both powerful and tender, commanding and gentle. The final section of her performance approached. The music became more intricate, each note deliberate, each pause meaningful. She added small flourishes and subtle variations that demonstrated not only her skill but her understanding of the music. Her heart beat with excitement, but her hands remained steady. She knew exactly where each note should go, how it should sound, and how it should make the audience feel. With each chord, the room seemed to lean in closer, captivated by the beauty and emotion she conveyed. Then came the final note. She pressed it firmly, letting it resonate, linger, and fade naturally. For a long moment, the auditorium remained completely silent. The girl lifted her hands slowly, her chest rising and falling as she caught her breath. She opened her eyes and scanned the room. Faces that had once been skeptical were now wide-eyed with awe. Teachers and students alike were frozen in disbelief, unable to look away. Even the parents seemed enchanted, as if the music had reached directly into their hearts. The silence was followed by a growing wave of applause. It began hesitantly with a few claps from the front rows, then spread quickly, filling the entire auditorium. Students cheered, teachers clapped, and parents stood, some with tears in their eyes. The girl smiled quietly, feeling a warmth in her chest. She had done it. She had faced doubt, skepticism, and laughter, and she had silenced them all with the power of her music. After she stood and bowed slightly, the applause grew even louder. Teachers approached her backstage, some offering kind words, some expressing surprise at the depth of her talent. The girl responded politely, never boasting, simply acknowledging their compliments with quiet gratitude. She knew that words were unnecessary. Her music had spoken, and it had said everything she wanted to share. It had revealed her dedication, her passion, and her extraordinary skill. Students surrounded her afterward, eager to ask questions, to learn how she had become so talented. Some asked for tips, others wanted to know how she had practiced. She answered softly, sharing the small details of her routine, the hours she had spent in secret, the love she felt for music. Her humility only made her more admired. The once laughing students now looked at her with respect and a sense of wonder. The girl had not only performed a beautiful piece, but she had also changed the way people saw her entirely. That evening, after the assembly, she returned home with a quiet sense of triumph. She sat at her piano, the room bathed in soft sunlight, and played once more. Her fingers flowed effortlessly, the notes carrying the emotions of the day, the excitement, the joy, the sense of accomplishment. She reflected on the faces of the audience, the expressions of surprise and admiration, and realized something important. She had broken through the wall of doubt, not with words or argument, but with the music she loved. She understood now that this was only the beginning. There would be more performances, more challenges, and more moments, where people might doubt her abilities. But she had discovered the power within herself, the ability to turn skepticism into admiration, to silence doubt with dedication, and to share her talent without fear. She had learned that her music was more than just notes on a page. It was a language, a voice, a way to connect with people and convey feelings that words could never express. As she played that evening, she imagined the reactions of the audience again. She smiled quietly, feeling proud not just of her performance, but of her perseverance. The laughter and doubt that had followed her throughout her life had lost their power. She knew that she could face anything, as long as she trusted herself and her music. Every note she played was a reminder of her strength, her resilience, and the beauty that could emerge when someone dared to believe in themselves. By the time she finally stopped, the The room was filled with the echo of the final chord. She closed her eyes, feeling the satisfaction of a day well spent, a performance completed, and a moment where she had truly shined. She understood that the first note that silenced the auditorium was not just a musical achievement. It was a declaration. It was proof that even the quietest voices, when nurtured with passion and courage, could make the loudest impact. And so, as the sun set outside her window, the girl knew something deep in her heart. She would continue to play, to practice, and to perform, not for approval, not for applause, but for the music itself. It was her gift, her expression, and her voice. And that first note, that powerful, silencing note, had already changed everything. How the world saw her, how she saw herself, and how she would face every challenge yet to come. After the performance, the girl felt a mix of relief, pride, and quiet excitement. The applause had filled the auditorium, but more than that, she could feel the shift in the way people looked at her. Students who had once whispered or laughed now approached her with smiles, some shy, some eager to talk. Teachers who had doubted her came forward as well, their expressions a mixture of admiration and remorse. It was strange for her to see them looking at her differently, but she tried not to let it distract her. She had always known her worth, even when others had not. As she stepped off the stage and walked through the crowded auditorium, several students reached out to compliment her. "That was amazing," one whispered, almost in awe. Another said quietly, "I didn't know you could play like that. It was beautiful." She smiled softly and nodded, thanking them politely, though she did not feel the need to boast. She had played because she loved it, not for approval or recognition. Yet, the appreciation she saw now filled her with warmth. For the first time, she realized that people could be moved, inspired, and even changed by what she created. The teachers gathered around her shortly after. The music teacher, who had been most skeptical, spoke first. "I was wrong to doubt you," she said quietly, her voice sincere. "Your talent is extraordinary. I wish I had recognized it sooner." The girl nodded, accepting the apology gracefully. It felt strange to hear such words, but she did not resent them. She knew that sometimes people needed to see proof before they could believe. The important thing was that now they understood. Other teachers joined in, offering praise and encouragement. "You have a gift that cannot be ignored," one said. "I hope you continue to share it. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself again." The girl felt her chest swell with quiet happiness. She had spent so long hiding, so long playing in secret, believing that her music was her alone. Now, she saw that it could touch others, bring joy, and perhaps even inspire. That thought filled her with a new kind of courage, a courage to share her gift openly from now on. The students' reactions were equally powerful. Some lingered to ask her how she had learned to play so well. She answered simply, explaining that she practiced every day, sometimes for hours, and that she loved music. She didn't talk about the frustrations, the mistakes, or the long hours of repetition. She focused on the joy it brought her, the way music made her feel alive. The students listened, captivated, as if hearing a secret for the first time. Some looked at their own hobbies differently, wondering if they too could pursue them with dedication and love. After the assembly, the girl walked through the hallways of the school, noticing the small ways people treated her differently. Some students smiled and waved, others nodded in quiet respect. Even those who had laughed before seemed hesitant now, unsure how to respond. She realized that talent alone could not change people completely, but it could make them pause, reconsider, and see someone differently. She had done that without words, only through the music she loved. That evening, as she returned home, she felt a sense of calm she had never experienced before. She sat at her piano, the sunlight fading softly through the window, and played again. This time, she let her fingers move freely, without concern for technique or perfection. She played for herself, for the music that had always been her companion, and for the feeling of triumph she now carried. Each note seemed to reflect the day's events. The awe of the audience, the respect of her teachers, and the quiet pride she felt in herself. Her parents, who had watched the assembly from the back, entered the room quietly. They did not interrupt her playing. Instead, they stood behind her, smiling, feeling proud and amazed at what she had accomplished. They had always known she had talent, but seeing it recognized by the entire school was a new experience. When she finally finished, they approached her, their eyes shining with admiration. "We are so proud of you," her mother said softly. "You worked hard, and it showed today." Her father nodded, adding, "You have something special. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt it." The girl smiled, feeling a mix of humility and confidence. She had faced doubt, laughter, and skepticism all her life, and yet she had emerged stronger, not only proving her talent, but discovering her own resilience. She understood now that recognition from others, while pleasant, was not the goal. The real reward was knowing her own worth, trusting herself, and sharing her gift without fear. The applause and admiration from others were just a reflection of what she already knew inside. In the days that followed, the girl's life at school began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. Teachers treated her with more respect, consulting her for musical advice and encouraging her to participate in competitions. Students who had once ignored or mocked her now approached her with curiosity, some even seeking to learn from her dedication. She found herself becoming a quiet source of inspiration, showing that talent and hard work could overcome doubt and negativity. Opportunities began to open up as well. The school invited her to perform at local events, competitions, and even community gatherings. Each time, she faced new audiences, new challenges, and new moments of nerves, but she also carried with her the knowledge that she could overcome them. Each performance strengthened her confidence, teaching her that perseverance, practice, and passion could move people and create change. Through it all, she remained humble and focused. She did not seek fame or attention. She played because it brought her joy, because it allowed her to express what words could not. And yet, she realized that sharing her music with others was equally rewarding. Watching faces light up, hearing applause, and seeing admiration in eyes that had once doubted her became a new source of fulfillment. She discovered that her gift could not only bring her personal satisfaction but could also touch the hearts of others. One afternoon, as she practiced at home, she thought back to the first day she had played in front of the class. She remembered the laughter, the whispers, and the doubt. She realized how far she had come since then, not just in skill but in confidence. She had turned skepticism into respect, doubt into admiration, and silence into applause. And she understood something even more profound. Her music had given her a voice, a presence, and a way to connect with people that nothing else could. The girl knew that her journey was far from over. There would be challenges, moments of fear, and times when people might underestimate her again. But she had learned a valuable lesson. Talent alone was not enough. Belief in oneself, dedication, and courage were equally important. She had faced doubt and mockery and had emerged not only victorious but stronger, more confident, and more determined to continue her journey. As the weeks passed, her reputation as a talented pianist grew. Teachers recommended her for special programs and mentorships. Students asked for tips and advice. She was invited to perform in new settings, each time discovering that the joy of sharing her music far outweighed any nervousness or fear. And yet, she remained the same quiet girl she had always been, humble, thoughtful, and dedicated. She had not changed who she was. She had only discovered the power of believing in herself and sharing her gift. Her story began to inspire others, both in school and beyond. Students who had once doubted themselves or felt overlooked began to see that talent and hard work could create change. Teachers realized the importance of recognizing hidden potential, encouraging all students to pursue their passions. And the girl, quietly and steadily, continued to play, to grow, and to touch the lives of those around her. One evening, as she played at home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She remembered the first hesitant notes, the fear of judgment, the laughter and whispers, and the moment her music had finally silenced the room. She smiled softly, feeling gratitude for every experience, the doubts, the challenges, and the triumphs. They had shaped her into the person she had become. someone who could face the world with confidence, grace, and a quiet strength that nothing could shake. The girl understood now that her music was more than just sound. It was a voice, a story, and a bridge to connect hearts. It had given her courage, confidence, and recognition, but most importantly, it had taught her to believe in herself. She had discovered that true talent shines brightest when nurtured with dedication, shared with honesty, and protected by the belief that one's own passion is worth pursuing. As she closed her piano for the night, she felt a sense of fulfillment and peace. She knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. She had learned that even the quietest person could leave a powerful mark on the world, that hidden talent could inspire, and that belief in oneself could overcome any obstacle. And as she turned off the lights and prepared for sleep, she carried with her the certainty that her music, her dedication, and her courage would guide her through every stage of her journey, and that no one could ever silence the voice of her talent again.